Her name was Dorothy. She knew the name of every single person on her street, all 41 of them, including the children. When she passed away, her funeral had to be moved to a larger hall because so many neighbors wanted to attend. Today, the average American cannot name more than 2 of their neighbors. A 2023 report from the United States Surgeon General declared loneliness a public health epidemic, linking chronic isolation to health outcomes as severe as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Dorothy never had a contacts app. She never needed one. Her granddaughter, clearing out the house after the funeral, found something strange. A small notebook by the phone, listing names, birthdays, and small details, whose mother was sick, whose son was overseas, who took sugar in their coffee, and who didn't. 41 names. All up to date. Dorothy had never called it networking. She had never called it community building. She called it just knowing your neighbors. What Dorothy had were 10 habits so ordinary she never thought of them as a skill. She thought of them as simply how you lived on a street with other people. Nobody on her block called them anything either, because everyone on that block had them. She had no app reminding her of birthdays, no service sending flowers on her behalf, no influencer teaching her community building as a personal brand strategy, no book about radical hospitality she paid $20 for. What she had were 10 habits. The habits were the part nobody sold her, because the habits were the part that actually worked. Then something changed. Not human beings, not what people need from the people around them. What changed is exactly what this video is about. Before number 10, subscribe. This channel exists to tell you exactly this kind of story. Every week. Dorothy answered her own door. Every single time, no matter what she was doing. She did not check who it was first. She did not let it go to silence. The door was answered immediately, with her full attention. This sounds small. It taught an entire street that Dorothy was reachable. Research on social trust from Harvard's Kennedy School has found that perceived availability, the sense that someone can be reached easily, is one of the strongest predictors of whether a relationship survives long-term, often mattering more than the depth of any single conversation. Dorothy never measured her availability. She simply answered the door. The do not disturb culture, the screened call, the unanswered knock, these are modern inventions. Dorothy's door had no screen. Dorothy never had the product. Dorothy never had the problem either. Dulnam moi tu bon. Number 9. Dulnam moi vo bon. Dorothy always had something ready to offer. Coffee on the stove, a plate of something in the icebox. If someone appeared at her door, she never said, "I have nothing to give you." She always had something. This was not abundance. The Maple Street household had $11 a week to its name in some years. It was preparation, a habit of always keeping a little extra, specifically so no one would ever be turned away empty-handed. Hospitality researchers studying mid-century American communities have noted that ready hospitality, keeping resources prepared for unplanned guests, was a near-universal practice before 1970 and has declined sharply alongside the rise of scheduled, RSVP-based socializing. Dorothy's coffee pot was never empty by accident. Dorothy never had the product. Dorothy never had the problem either. Number Pinkolde Mindelen. We are not far from number 1. The habit that an entire industry built around community was designed to replace. Stay with me. Number 8. Dorothy brought food to anyone going through something hard without being asked. A death in the family, a new baby, a husband out of work. Dorothy did not wait for a request. She simply appeared at the door with a dish, said little, and left. A 2018 study in the Journal of Social and Personal Relationships found that unsolicited practical support, help offered before it's requested, is experienced as significantly more meaningful than help given after being asked, because it requires the giver to have been paying attention. The meal delivery and thinking of you gift industries are now worth billions, much of it selling a substitute for attention that costs nothing to actually pay. Dorothy paid attention. That was the whole mechanism. Dorothy never had the product. Dorothy never had the problem either. Number 7. Dorothy remembered details that did not concern her directly. She knew which neighbor's son was overseas, which family was struggling that month, whose mother was sick. None of it affected her own household. She tracked it anyway. Her small notebook by the phone was not unusual for her generation. It was simply where she kept the details a community runs on. Researchers studying social cohesion call this distributed care tracking, the informal, unpaid work of remembering who in a community needs what, historically done almost entirely by women like Dorothy, with no system, no app, and no recognition. That invisible tracking is precisely what modern community management software now charges churches and neighborhoods monthly fees to replicate. Dorothy never had the product. Dorothy never had the problem either. Number 6. Dorothy never let a small disagreement with a neighbor go unaddressed for more than a few days. If something was wrong between her and Agnes next door, she walked over, said it plainly, and resolved it. She did not let resentment simmer across a shared fence for months. Conflict researchers have found that unresolved, low-grade neighbor friction, not dramatic feuds, but small simmering tensions, is one of the strongest predictors of social withdrawal from a community over time. Dorothy's habit of addressing small friction immediately meant the street stayed knit together for decades, through disagreements that would have quietly ended most modern friendships. Dorothy never had the product. Dorothy never had the problem either. Dyd domkrol namsirim, dyd the zio wenden. We are almost at number 1. The habit that no community app, no neighborhood platform, and no social network has ever been able to replicate. Almost there. Dyd the zio wenden. Number 5. Durham orti damzi. Dorothy hosted something at her house regularly, even when it was small, not elaborate parties. Sometimes just 2 neighbors and a pot of coffee on a Tuesday afternoon. But her door opened for this, on a rough rhythm, every week. A consistent gathering point, researchers call it a third place, distinct from home and work, has been identified as essential to community cohesion, and its decline since the 1970s has been directly linked to rising rates of social isolation. Dorothy's kitchen table was a third place before anyone had a name for it. Dorothy never had the product. Dorothy never had the problem either. Mona midjitham der wanum forcing. Number 4. Dorothy never gossiped about the people she helped. She knew everyone's hardest details: illness, money trouble, family conflict, and she told no one. Her notebook was for her memory, not for conversation. This sounds like simple decency. It was also structural. A community only shares its real struggles with people who have proven they will not repeat them. Dorothy's silence was the reason 41 households trusted her with the truth. Dorothy never had the product. Dorothy never had the problem either. Number 3. Dorothy introduced people to each other on purpose. If she knew 2 neighbors who would get along, or who could help each other, she made sure they met, not for credit, simply because she could see a connection neither of them could see yet. Network researchers call this brokerage, the act of connecting 2 otherwise unconnected people, and have found that communities with a few active brokers like Dorothy have measurably stronger social resilience during crises than communities without them. Dorothy was Maple Street's broker for 30 years, and no one ever called her that. Dorothy never had the product. Dorothy never had the problem either. Dorothy never had the problem either. Doral Anmals Bof. Number 2. Dorothy showed up to things in person every time it was possible. A neighbor's father's funeral, a child's graduation, a hospital visit. If she could physically be there, she was there, even when a card would have been easier. Researchers studying grief and major life events consistently find that physical presence during hard or significant moments is remembered decades later, while even the most thoughtful written message is often forgotten within weeks. Dorothy was remembered at funerals she had attended 40 years earlier. Dorothy never had the product. Dorothy never had the problem either. Number 1. Number 1. Dorothy believed her neighbors were her responsibility, not just her acquaintances. This is the one no community platform has ever been able to sell, because it isn't a feature, it's a belief, held quietly, that obligates you to people you didn't choose and aren't required to help. Dorothy did not believe community was something that happened to you if you were lucky enough to have nice neighbors. She believed it was something you built, deliberately, one door knock and one remembered detail at a time. When Agnes's husband died, Dorothy did not wait to be asked. When the new family moved in 3 doors down, Dorothy was the first to bring a meal. When a teenager on the block got in trouble, half the street already knew, because Dorothy had made sure people who cared were paying attention. She never had a community organizer's training. She never had a book on building social capital. She had a mother who told her once, "The street takes care of itself only if someone decides to take care of the street." Dorothy never had the product. Dorothy never had the problem either. Dorothy passed away in 1998. She was 79 years old. Her funeral was moved to the larger hall at the church because 31 of the original 41 households on Maple Street were still there to attend, along with dozens of children and grandchildren who had grown up under her watch without ever quite realizing it. Nobody mentioned a strategy. They mentioned the coffee always being on, the dish that appeared the week someone's father died, the names she never forgot, the door that was always answered. 10 habits Dorothy never named, never wrote in a book, and never once thought to call a system. She simply called it being a good neighbor. What changed between Dorothy's street and the one you live on today was not what human beings need from the people around them. Those needs have not changed since 1950. What changed was who got paid when those needs were replaced with something they could platform and monetize by the download. Pick one thing from this list, come back in the comments in a week and tell me what it did. If you remember a neighbor like Dorothy, tell me below. I read every single comment. The next video is already waiting.